morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning, Thursday, July the 10th. It's Jim White and Simon Jordan. We are live on talkSPORT. We're also streaming live on YouTube and your smart TV. So many of you getting in touch this morning. 03717 223344 810 89. We will be taking some calls at some stage very soon. I'm going to have to go into the explainer, as we call it, again. Sitting opposite me is US businessman John Textor. Hugely successful he is as well. But Crystal Palace, whether John likes it or not, could well be demoted to the Conference League after a ruling in France, I'm looking at you, saw Lyon's relegation to Ligue 2 rescinded. As it stands, Lyon, John owns Lyon, will be in the Europa League, but the FA Cup winners Crystal Palace will not be due to UEFA's multi-club ownership rules. And that centres specifically on John Textor's involvement with both clubs. And that's why we're talking about it this morning. Multi-club ownership, the model. John, again, I stress, I want to thank you for coming hot from the Eurostar and joining Simon and myself live in the show. Your company, Eagle Football Holdings, at one point had Palace, Lyon, Botafogo and Molenbeek in Belgium. They're all in your portfolio, or at least they all were. But with the rules as they are, what is the point of multi-club ownership when it gets to a situation like this?
Well, I mean, certainly across continent, you don't have those conflicts. And, you know, there's a player migration thing that happens that we have nothing to do with. Water flows where it must, and players want to go where they want. And if you're in South America, you can have a lot of fulfillment staying there and playing there, but many of those players want to get to Europe. You know, the best managed league in the world is the Premier League, best TV contract, greatest visibility. So you can do a lot before you even get into these European conflicts. I think when I got into it, I was so sure that it would be so long before Palace was in the situation that the evolution of the rules is happening very quickly. UEFA is trying to address this. So many clubs are owned by multi-clubs. There are a lot of benefits. It's not just a business strategy. It's a collaboration strategy. I honestly thought they'd fix it before I had a problem. And, you know, that's an apology to Crystal Palace fans because, you know, I just never contemplated this would happen this quickly. And I'm not running Crystal Palace. I'm not paying attention to it, you know, as much as I might have were we in a majority position. And then this conflict happens and it's like lightning striking and suddenly we beat Manchester City in the FA Cup final and it's a horrible situation.
I mean,
you never saw it coming.
UEFA have got to. It's muddled thinking, and you know, in defence of Steve Parish,
but those are the rules.
But in defence of but the
evolving rules.
They're kind of not. They've got to define what decisive control is. They can't just pick a random number of how many shares you have in a business and suggest that that's decisive control. If you've got supporting documentation that illustrates that the actual executive running of a football club is based upon this construct, then they've got to define more clearer what is decisive ownership, what is decisive influence, because that is the point that everyone is arguing about.
They're trying, and it is evolving, and this multi-club thing is also becoming more and more, you know, popular.
More de rigueur, yeah.
And, you know, I think they look at it and say, okay, 30%, if a guy's got 30% money in, well, he must have influence. But my document says no influence. I mean, so case by case you have to look at it. And I think in our case they did. They studied it seriously, and the only reason they're waiting is obviously because of the Lyon situation. But I think they have safe harbor in the fact that I have no decisive influence, that my document is very clear that I'm not allowed to have a vote or any involvement, and it is what it is. I think they have to go not only by their rules, but by our documents.
Nonetheless, you've sold your stake to Woody Johnson of the New York Jets.
Of course. Yeah,
so
and by the way,
at this
by the way, on that ambition thing, I was a little hard on Steve. I think Woody's going to be a very good owner. I think he's got ambition. I think that coming into my situation, he's got a lot of energy. I think the taste of this FA Cup, I think the owners now, I think they're going to want Europe every year. So let me qualify what I said earlier. You know, it has been relegation and survival for so long. So let's see if this inflection point of ambition does something permanent.
But you're now out of Palace.
I honestly, I don't know if it's closed yet. Is it closed?
Is it? Well, I don't know. Is it? Is it officially that you've sold to Johnson of the Jets?
I think it's subject only to Premier League approval, and so it's a firm contract. I'm sure it's 100% because
you don't see any issues.
No, he's Woody Johnson. Christ's sake.
If you had the money.
Well, not only that, he's a really good guy. He was I guess, ambassador to the UK. We're all using his baby powder and his shampoo and his Q-tips. So what could be wrong with that? It's not like he's been running guns or anything.
So as he buys into Palace and you're out, I'm going to ask you.
The way you say that's so hurtful.
Are you going to try and buy another English club?
Well, first of all, my kids are huge Palace fans. Like, one of my kids was, I think, actually hung off of a bridge by Nottingham Forest fans when he went to a away match, and he's had as many beers with, the Homesdale Fanatics as anybody. But, and they're older now. But yeah, of course. I mean, I'm a big Anglophile when it comes to football. My great-grandfather was English. I think my first game was Stockport County. My second game was Leyton Orient. Like, I don't know. I have friends that grew up rooting for Aston Villa. I had a pastor that was a Wolves fan. Like, I didn't go to my first Premier League game until I was much, much older. So I saw the raw side of English football for a long time. And
you love English football? I
do. I mean, I really like a championship level club more than I like Premier League clubs. I mean,
have you got your own one?
I'm not going to say it publicly because, they're owned by people. But yeah, I've got my favorite clubs. I don't have a right to just, throw their name into a ridiculous discussion of what I'm doing next. But yeah, I mean,
But if that's your intention, it's your intention. It's not ridiculous. Are you looking at Sheffield Wednesday?
Look, I think, Sheffield Wednesday to me is the example of what's wrong with English football, because they should still have a chance at winning a championship every year, and they don't, right? So this, when we say, Manchester City, they had this historic win. Well, no, they're not really historic when you have that kind of advantage. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see the rules allow a Sheffield Wednesday to, win the Premier League again. I don't know if that day will ever happen, but.
And on that point, John, it's such a good point you make. It's not a level playing field any longer, is it? We've got nation states owning football clubs.
Yeah, and this is why multi-clubs.
This is why you guys still want an involvement.
This is why multi-clubs aren't a bad thing. I mean, what's great about our multi-club is that we see talent all over the world. We collaborate actively. We do all the things between our other clubs that we have not been doing with Palace, the kind of things that would drive UEFA crazy. Like, we don't sign a player at Botafogo unless the people at Lyon would want him on their squad. Now, we only have 4 players internationally can play in Lyon, so that's not really as much of a two-way traffic zone as you think. But we really get into the level of collaboration. Collaboration is the way you compete with unlimited money. If I can find 11 players in the dark corners of this world that are better than the players you can buy, we saw that on the pitch in Los Angeles against PSG.
Yeah.
Right? And look how that team was built.
Sure. We're going to take a brief break, John, and we might take two or three calls. I'm looking at the switchboard. As we get to the break, and you are opening up, and I'm asking questions and you are answering them, and I really do thank you for that. Were you totally serious about your bid for Everton? We know the Friedkin Group now have it.
Totally serious. First of all, I didn't do that stupid interview on Sky News on a whim. The owner of Everton at that time called me and said, John, the fans really need to understand your strategy. I need you to talk to this guy, Alan Meyer. I'd never known him before. I love him now. He's great.
Alan Myers is a great guy.
That was like the dumbest interview you could possibly give if you didn't know you were absolutely going to be the owner of the squad. So I absolutely knew we were going to be the owner of the squad. And what turns out is they were running 2 legal teams with a Chinese wall between them and 2 guys to the finish line, and neither one of us knew. I had talked to the Friedkin Group in advance because I knew they had already sort of won that first bid. They had the money on the stadium, and I called and said, I'm not going to go for this if you guys are still interested because it's your deal. I mean, they put the money up for the stadium. They had to be dealt with. Then I get one of those calls like I think it was a Friday. We were waiting on wiring instructions. We didn't understand why they weren't coming. Everything was done, completely done.
You'd bought the club, you thought.
Yeah, and then I get a call over the weekend from one of the owners who said
Farhad Mashiri.
Just one of the owners, and we decided to go another direction. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, you literally asked me to roll out and lay out the strategy. Why am I talking about coaching decisions at Everton if I wasn't already the owner? And then
and you'd wired the offer.
No, we were waiting on wiring instructions, but full documents done, everything done, closed, right? And then we get the call. I was in shock. And like, why would you want to buy Everton? Well, one, wanted to buy Crystal Palace. I'd like to stay at Crystal Palace. I love Crystal Palace, but you know, we're out there and Everton's available. Yeah, it was a great opportunity. Friedkin's guy calls me and says, you know, John, it's like 8 days ago. We just changed our mind. I'm like, really? So.
And they got it and you didn't.
Not only that, but I'm looking forward to meeting Dan because he just bought a house about 6 doors down from mine in Jupiter Island. And apparently we're going to be neighbors. So we'll be able to have a beer over this.
I'd love to eavesdrop that conversation over the garden wall.
I hear he's a super good guy.
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't know how close we were. If there was a Chinese wall between us, they weren't aware of what we were doing. It was their club to buy. They'd put up the money. No problem there. We'll have a beer over it. Every time I say I'm going to have a beer with somebody, I find out they don't drink. So I got to stop saying that. But I do.
It's coming over to me that you love Crystal Palace. You've said that umpteen times.
Of course.
Would you love to have an involvement with them again sometime in the future?
We're called Eagle Football Group, right? Yeah, of course. Named the whole company after him. Would I love to have an involvement with him again? I'd love to be able to go to games. I'd still like to be known as somebody that helped for a time when they needed it. I'm really proud of the academy. I think South London produces probably 20% of the athletes in the Premier League, and now they have a place where they can play top-level ball and don't have to be sucked away to bigger clubs. But
okay,
yeah,
we'll take a couple of calls the other side of the break, and we'll broaden out the discussion as well. John Textor with Simon and himself live on talkSPORT with Selco, where the trade goes.